Alright, so we ended the last video on talking about these several steps here, I think there's 8 of them, that you're going to have to do a hypothesis test. And we're going to do it, there's a traditional way to do it, and there's something called a pre-probability value way to do it. We're going to do it with probability values because I think that's something that's my personal preference. I think something that is more in tune with the modern way of doing hypothesis testing. So again, what we're going to start with is parts A and B. We're going to identify the population parameter of interest. And that's going to be easy because this whole target, we're talking about population means, claims about a population mean. Now, if this were a test or something and next, by the way, next target will be about a population proportion, but if this were a test that we're mixing them together, that's something you would have to do is figure out what type of population parameter am I talking about. And then we're going to have to state something called the null and alternative hypotheses from a given claim and express both in symbolic form. We'll show you how to do that. If we got time on this video, we'll do 3 examples that are on your student example worksheets. If not, we'll do that for the next video. But let's talk about the idea of B, these hypotheses. And from your days in science class, what a hypothesis is just a claim or statement about a characteristic of the population. For instance, our example we started class with, do we believe that the human body temperature is something other than 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit? That would be a claim, and then we have to test it and using sample data. We can't use population, we can't use, data from the entire population because that's, too many people. So we have to take a sample, we have to see does that sample, is the evidence in that sample strong enough to say that the claim is true or not, okay? I want to be careful when I say true or not. So a hypothesis test or a test of significance is a procedure based on sample evidence and data and probability used to test statements regarding characteristics of one or more populations. A little bit of a typo there, I'll have to go back and change that, okay? Now, there are 2 types of hypotheses. There's something called the null hypothesis, and that's denoted by H0, H sub 0. That is a 0, not an O, and it is a statement about a value of the population parameter. Now, again, we're talking population means here, but it could be about a proportion, it could be a standard deviation, and is equal to some claimed value or known value. The term null is used to indicate no change, no effect, or no difference. A lot of times the null hypothesis is called the dull hypothesis. Why dull? Because it just means it's a status quo. Matter of fact, null does mean status quo. The null hypothesis always contains the condition of equality. Always. No matter what your statements are, it always means our population parameter is being assumed to be equal to some value. And so I've given you some examples down here involving a mean, proportion, and standard deviation. Now, again, notice all of these contain equality. We're assuming, regardless of the statements being made, that the population parameter here, and I'll say this right here, that, for instance, the population mean is equal to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if we think it's not, the null hypothesis will always have equal in it. Okay? That's it, period. End of story on that. Now, you're not going to use all these, but again, for this particular target, we're just talking about some types of testing claims about a population mean. Next target, we'll talk about a population proportion, and then we used to talk about standard deviation, but we don't have time for that. Okay? Now, then there's the alternative hypothesis, denoted by H sub A or H sub 1. This is the notation we're going to use, H sub A for alternative. It is a statement that the parameter has a value that somewhat differs from the null hypothesis. It is a statement that we are trying to find evidence for. Okay? We're going to see if our statistical evidence is strong enough to say that the alternative is true. The symbolic form of the alternative hypothesis must have one of these symbols, less than, greater than, or not equal to. So I've listed here 3 ways to write the alternative hypothesis for population means. You're not going to use all these. You're only going to use one based off any statements or claims that are made. Okay? We may say that, okay, the the population mean for the average adult body temperature is greater than 98.6. We may say less than 98.6, or we may say it differs or is not equal to 98.6. Again, we're only going to use one of these statements depending on the statement made about the hypothesized mean. So you're going to write the null alternative, the null hypothesis, which is a statement of equality, and then the alternative hypothesis, which is a statement of non-equality, of inequality. Okay? So let's do this, because this is kind of one of the harder things that people have to try to understand. So what I've done is, I've got 3 examples here that I think I'll wait to go through on the next slide, next video, excuse me, and we'll learn how to set up a null and alternative hypothesis in symbolic form for some given statements. Okay? We'll do that on the next video.